Welcome to Just Say No, where curiosity meets clarity and cannabis education starts with understanding, not assumptions. I'm your host, Maria Calabrese, founder of Green Bee Life, broadcasting to you from the Inland Empire on KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM on your dial, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Today's episode is one I've wanted to do for a long time because few topics create more confusion for consumers than this one. CBD versus THC. You know, we hear these terms constantly. We see them everywhere on gummies, oils, beverages, skincare products, wellness products, dispensary menus, even pet products. But there's still so much confusion around what the difference actually is. Do they work the same way? Does CBD get you high? Why do some people prefer THC while others avoid it entirely? And what role do cannabinoids actually play in our bodies? Wait a minute. What the heck even is a cannabinoid? The truth is, cannabis is far more nuanced than most people are led to believe. So the confusion is real. CBD and THC both come from the cannabis plant, but they interact with the body differently and can produce very different personal experiences depending on dosage, formulation, consumption method, body chemistry, and everyone's individual tolerance. Today, we're going to unpack all of it in a way that's approachable, grounded, and educational. Honestly, this is why at Green Bee Life we work so hard to try to cut through the hype and focus on the education, because the more informed people are, the better decisions they can make for themselves. And that's always been important to me personally. Helping people feel less intimidated in this space by being more informed when it comes to cannabis and wellness products. So throughout today's program, I'll be joined by voices and experts from past Just Say No conversations, including physicians, cannabis educators, researchers, veterinarians, and wellness professionals to help break down cannabinoids, the endocannabinoid system, CBD and THC products, responsible use, and why understanding what you're consuming matters more than ever in today's rapidly evolving cannabis marketplace. Whether you're canna curious, wellness focused, completely new to cannabinoids or cannabis, or just simply trying to better understand the products now flooding the market in our inboxes, this episode is for you. So get ready to grow your know with us, because when we come back, we're going to start with the foundation of it all. What are cannabinoids and why does the human body respond to them in the first place? Because like it or not, cannabis is exploding.
By 2020, Bank of America and Merrill Lynch estimate that will grow to $35 billion. And many experts believe it could eventually reach $200 billion each and every year.
Welcome back to Just Say No. I'm your host, Maria Calabrese, and you're listening to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM on the dial, or wherever you get your podcast. All right, we're returning to unpacking cannabis, CBD versus THC. Before we can truly understand CBD and THC, it helps to understand why cannabinoids affect the body at all. What many people don't realize, I didn't, is that the human body already contains a built-in signaling network known as the endocannabinoid system, often referred to as the ECS. I want to revisit part of a conversation with a wonderful physician and cannabis medicine expert, Dr. David Bierman, who explains why education around cannabinoids and the ECS has become increasingly important with modern medicine in medical schools.
And what's important, I think, is that we get the medical schools to start educating doctors not only about the endocannabinoid system, which in 2014 only 13% of medical schools did. I think there's a little bit of an increase in that, and we are beginning to see some medical schools actually have a focus on cannabinoid medicine. UCLA has started a program under the direction of Dr. Jeffrey Chen, UC Irvine under the direction of Daniel Piamelli, and the organization that has been around the longest in California at a medical school is the California Medical Cannabis Research Center at the University of California at San Diego Medical School. So we need more and more of that, because there aren't enough doctors who appreciate not only the incredible spread of therapeutic applications of cannabis, but also its impressive safety and its very mild or modest side effect profile. One of the things that I think is important to know is that there's no one size fits all.
It's whatever suits you.
And the other thing that I think is worth mentioning that I tell my patients is, just because cannabis was illegal for 75 years doesn't mean that it treats every condition for every person. I mean, some people are going to have some relief from cannabis, some people are going to have a lot, and some people it's not going to benefit them. But the really good thing about cannabis is that it has so few side effects, and the side effects that it has are mild. And all you need to know when you start taking cannabis is to start with a low dose and only slowly increase the dose. Because what I found is that for things like anxiety and attention deficit disorder, that relatively low doses of THC, by which I mean 2.5 to 5 milligrams 2 or 3 times a day, is sufficient to provide that anxiety release, to help with the focus and concentration. And I can't recall anybody that ever complained about dysphoria or even euphoria at 5 milligrams of THC. Basically, we're reinventing pharmacy here. The fact of the matter is that cannabis has been a medicine for over 4,000 years.
Yes.
And it was in the United States Pharmacopoeia from the 1850s until 1942. At the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, cannabis was the third most common ingredient in doctors' prescriptions and over-the-counter medications after opium and alcohol. And in the 1920s, American physicians wrote 3 million prescriptions a year that contained cannabis. In fact, in 1937, the American Medical Association, in the person of Dr. William C. Woodward, former Commissioner of Health for Washington, D.C., Health Commissioner for Boston, former President of the American Public Health Association, a doctor and an attorney, and the AMA's Chief Legal Counsel since 1924. In his testimony, he said that the AMA knew of no problems with the medical use of cannabis, that there's no difficulty with that. And that was in 1937. And by the way, at that time, there were 25 over-the-counter medications that you could get without a prescription available in pretty much every drugstore in the land. So what we have here is one of the most successful propaganda campaigns in history. The fact that we have used drug policy to marginalize, discriminated against people ever since Pope Innocent VI declared that cannabis was a tool of the devil in the 15th century. And he did that because it helped relieve the pain of childbirth from women. And we know that they have that pain because of Eve's sin, right? And also, of course, the midwives were healing people with herbs, which to my way of thinking is God's medicine, and they weren't using faith or relying on the priests in order for the healing. So, you have to burn those witches because they're heretics, and we've continued with that. There's a new book that's going to be coming out that is sort of designed for nurses and doctors, and I hope it'll be used as a textbook, and it covers a lot of the science related to cannabis, cannabinoids, and the endocannabinoid system. Called Cannabis Medicine, A Guide to the Practice of Cannabinoid Medicine. It's got a lot of science in it, but most of it is readable and understandable. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to bring these to the attention of your audience. The American Academy of Cannabinoid Medicine is there to certify those cannabinoid medicine specialists who are practicing good quality medicine. We want to marginalize those doctors like the doc in Venice Beach who has the gal in the bikini out in front saying evaluation is $39.95. Cannabis is a real medicine. It deserves more respect than
Yes.
Absolutely. We just have to be more proactive, and more doctors need to learn more about the endocannabinoid system, as well as treating humans with cannabinoid therapy.
One of the most important takeaways there is that cannabinoid experiences are highly individualized. People ask me all the time, how's it going to make me feel? Well, how's CBD going to make me feel versus THC? It's individualized. There is no universal response, no one size fits all product, and no single cannabis experience. And that's part of why understanding CBD and THC can feel so consuming for so many. It could just feel not consuming, pardon the pun. It can just feel, that's very funny. It could just feel so confusing for consumers. Cannabis contains far more compounds than most people are led to believe. And researchers are still learning how cannabinoids interact with the body and each other. In this next conversation, cannabis educators and advocates Francis Shawalker and Barbie Summers, OG founders of the Mary Jane University, they further the conversation in a really relatable and enjoyable way, and they demonstrate why cannabinoid education is so needed and becoming such an important part of modern culture. Let's have a listen.
It really starts with our endocannabinoid system.
So everybody has an endocannabinoid system?
Yes.
Even animals? 'Cause
Even
I'm seeing the pet
animals
products.
and plants.
Plants? Wow.
The endocannabinoid system was actually discovered in Israel when they were doing some studies on how does THC work.
Israel and Canada are probably the most advanced with studies.
Yes, they were allowed to do this research. And, that was the question. How does THC work? And they actually found that we have a system that's indigenous and it's very individual, much like our own fingerprint. So my endocannabinoid system is different from yours and different from Barbie's, different from Lindsay's. And that's why cannabis is such an individualized medicine. Now, when you hear about the endocannabinoid system, what does it do?
Yeah.
How does it all work? So this is where the plant magic actually comes in with these cannabinoids and the terpenoids. That's where all the medicine is in the plant.
I mean, CBD is one thing that really throws people for a loop. There's a lot of confusion. THC and CBD are the two most well-known cannabinoids.
THC is a cannabinoid?
Yes.
That's
And
a cannabinoid too.
yes, I love to remind people there's more than two. You're really cutting yourself short if you're only going to focus on these two. And even people that are all about just CBD because it's non-psychoactive, I love to share with them the benefits of raw cannabis and getting the benefit of full spectrum cannabinoids.
We don't even know how many chemical compounds are in cannabis right now. We've been able to isolate a few of them and see some benefit from them. We can find out what their therapeutic benefit is. Have you ever had experience with a terpene before?
I wouldn't know.
Well, let me ask you a question. Have you ever smelled a rose?
Yeah,
Have you smelled lavender?
sure.
Then you have plenty of experience with terpenes.
So they're not specific to marijuana.
No,
No.
they're how plants talk to each other.
What? Yeah. What?
Terpenes are in nature. Limonene is what makes a lemon smells like a lemon. Guess what makes lemon haze smell like lemon? Limonene. It's the same terpene.
And what we're finding out about terpenes is that number one, so it gives it the taste and it gives the smell, but it also gives the therapeutic benefit.
There's a feminine spirit to this. If you believe in plant medicine and into the spiritual side of it, some plants are categorized as feminine energy and some are masculine. So this is very much a feminine plant, and its roots are in compassion and caregiving. And as women, we're kind of programmed to do that. And yeah, I've always felt that way. And I just love the way some of these growers, I think it's very important to have the plant grown with love and care, because I feel that translates into the power of the medicine. Yes, we can mass produce it, and that is happening. There's large-scale grows, and that's one of the side effects of Prop 64. But we're still champions of the small grower, and we still encourage people to have their own grow in their house, have a plant, have cannabis as a house plant. When you start to talk about hemp and also go into the realm of CBD, what I like to say to just really clearly help people understand, they are of the same genus. There's the hemp, which is a low resin plant, and cannabis, which is a high resin plant. So the high resin plants tend to have more cannabinoids and more terpenes, and therefore more therapeutic benefits. Okay. Now, single molecule CBD is a very popular product that doesn't speak to whole plant medicine, which we very much are believers of. We believe the plant was meant to be used in its entirety, all the cannabinoids, not just the two that we happen to have memorized. There are many, many more than CBD and THC. Also, cannabis in its raw form, we highly celebrate. There's therapeutic benefits. Actually, the government's patent addresses that. CBDA is the precursor to CBD. So once you apply heat, you decarboxylate it. That's what we say in the industry. So you'll hear people saying, is that decarbed or raw? Both are very important. So the decarbed turns THCA, the acidic precursor to THC, into THC once you apply heat. And that's what gets you high. But you can enjoy THCA and not get high. You can eat this nug right now and get great therapeutic benefits with no high. Come on. Yes, there's many applications for this in the kitchen too. I even like to get a flower and taste it, Ooh, have a bud.
So is this the infamous bud?
Yes.
So the
bud
is the
nug.
bud.
What else can we call it? Fluffy pillow of goodness. No one strain is the right strain for everyone. But as we move towards pharmaceutical companies getting more and more involved in cannabis and sort of creating the strain of their dreams in the laboratory, once we isolate all the different cannabinoids and all the different terpenes, that's already happening from a flavor and mood perspective in the marketing and the branding of cannabis. You see a lot of vape pens, they don't tell you what strain it is, they call it relax. Because they've pulled together the cannabinoids that they want. They've created their dream mood.
It's so true. We often hear CBD and THC discussed as though they are completely separate experiences. But once you find good cannabis education, you come to learn it's far more nuanced than simply CBD versus THC. Cannabinoid products can affect everyone differently depending on dosage, formulation, metabolism, tolerance, and your own individual body chemistry. As more educators continue talking openly about cannabinoids, many consumers are realizing and coming to learn there's so much more to cannabis than they may have originally understood, given the limited information. So, just looking at CBD versus THC, let's just look at CBD. CBD in and of itself, there's isolate, there's broad spectrum, there's full spectrum, and that can become very confusing. So I want to have a listen to cannabis educator Barbie Summers as she breaks down some of the basics behind CBD specifically, while addressing cannabinoids and the endocannabinoid system.
There is quite the CBD bandwagon going on right now. That's the hot topic. It's the hot ingredient in skincare, cocktails, food, everything.
Whether you're new to CBD or have a high-level understanding of how it works, with the explosion of new products coming to market containing CBD as an ingredient, let's face it, it's hard to separate the hemp from the chaff. I'm joined by Barbie Summers, cannabis enthusiast, educator, who is the founder of Mary Jane University and High Dining. So Barbie, thank you for trying this product. I know that you've used cannabis products on your skin for years. Let's just back up and start with, what is CBD?
Well, CBD, also known as cannabidiol, is an extracted cannabinoid from the cannabis plant or the hemp plant. It is one of over 140 cannabinoids. THC also happens to be one. So we're still learning about all of them. How do they affect our bodies internally and externally? And it's really an exciting frontier.
So how does CBD work?
Well, CBD interacts with our endocannabinoid system, which all animals have. And that is a network of receptors in our body that interact with these cannabinoids, as well as the ones that we make endogenously, which are called endocannabinoids. These are phytocannabinoids, which we get from plants. The incorporation of these phytocannabinoids can help bring our bodies into a state of homeostasis.
And one of our body's biggest organs is the skin.
Exactly. Which is why people might want to supplement their diet as well as topically inside and out with phytocannabinoids. Conceivably, it makes sense to include CBD and other cannabinoids in skincare products.
There is a difference between a CBD isolate, broad spectrum, and full spectrum. So can you just kind of unpack that for us?
Yes, those are the three categories that consumers need to know. So isolate means there's been more laboratory intervention where they've isolated that one particular molecule.
It's just the CBD.
Just the CBD. Now, there are also scientific studies that report that CBD is much more effective with the presence of some THC, which is why...
Entourage effect.
Exactly. And that's why I gravitate more towards broad and full spectrum products. That's why I do like this, because it's broad spectrum. And actually on the label, you can see it has not only CBD, but also CBG and CBN, which I think is really great. Full spectrum and broad spectrum contain more of those cannabinoids and sometimes the terpenoids.
Have there been any reports on effects of CBG and CBN?
Not topically. Internally, yes.
Topically, we did find a study that CBD is associated with having a moisturizing effect.
Yeah, I read that study you sent me. I do think that there is benefit to my skin. I definitely feel moisturized, which is important to me since I live in a dry climate. And I usually have pretty even skin tone. I don't have any breakouts or inflammation. I'm a believer. Can I attribute it all to CBD? Well, first of all, I normally use full spectrum products or broad spectrum. So who knows? It could be some of those other cannabinoids or other phytochemicals. And I think it's an additive. I don't mean for it to be a replacement, but I like to add it into my skincare regime.
And well put. And it is an exciting frontier. But another big challenge for today's consumers isn't just understanding the cannabinoids, it's understanding the products. Terms like full spectrum, broad spectrum, isolate, tinctures, gummies, cannabinoids, terpenes, CBD dominant, THC dominant, they're everywhere. And not all cannabinoid products are created equally. Understanding product quality, sourcing, transparency, and lab testing. Quality, sourcing, transparency, and lab testing has become one of the most important parts of responsible cannabinoid use. I want to revisit part of a conversation with the amazing team at Aspen Green about different cannabinoid products, different delivery consumption methods, and what consumers should actually look for when shopping for CBD products. These guys, this team is just fantastic. Question: I'd like to talk to you guys about different consumption methods and why someone might choose a gummy over a tincture over a topical. Who wants to take that?
I can take it.
All right, go for it.
Yeah, so I would say depending on just like a person's composition and just their like how they metabolize food in general, some people have a better chance at, getting the experience they desire from, let's say, like a CBD oil versus a gummy, because gummy is completely contingent on your metabolism. And whereas a sublingual product is going to kind of, enter the bloodstream via the receptors in your mouth, and the GI tract plays a very little role in it. That's usually how we'll guide, customers into choosing a gummy versus an oil, or vice versa.
Yeah, so at Aspen Green, we work with farmers who are based in Colorado, and the farms themselves also have a USDA organic certification, which is amazing. We work with a couple of main strains of cannabis that they grow for us, and it's kind of broken up between two. We have our products like the relief products, the rest and calm products, all products that are supposed to be a little bit more like relaxing and calming to your system. For those, we utilize hemp plants that are a little bit more like indica leaning. They're all full spectrum, so we utilize all cannabinoids found in the hemp plant, but these tend to be more of like a relaxing composition to the plants. And then we also have our Bliss products, which is a super popular product that we offer. We have the Bliss oil and gummies, and those we use a different plants. Those have a higher concentration of like CBDV and THCV, which are cannabinoids that studies have found to be a little bit more like uplifting and energizing. So those are a great product for people who are wanting to, maybe more like daytime use, or just like, feel a little bit more energized and uplifted from taking CBD products. And as for the quality of the flower, like coming from a growing background on small and large scales, I can definitely verify just how insanely difficult it is to not only grow organic, but also to get USDA certified organic as well. So yeah, USDA organic is no like small feat. And I think it's really cool that we offer that.
It's very, very rare, and it's super impressive. Super impressive. And as impressive is their commitment to education and transparency, because let's face it, education and transparency matters, not just marketing hype. They can market till the cows come home, but if we don't know what the heck it is that they're selling, we're not going to pick up what they're putting down. We've got to understand what the choices are. And that's all through education. Because in today's cannabinoid marketplace, understanding what's actually in a product and how different products behave. What do they do? How are they going to improve my life? That's what will help you make more informed decisions. And one of the most fascinating aspects of cannabinoid science that I find is that the endocannabinoid system isn't unique to humans. So if you're a pet parent like myself or animal lover, it's exciting because help is on the way for our furry friends as well. Researchers and veterinarians have been studying cannabinoids across the animal kingdom, and leading the charge is veterinarian Dr. Tim Hsu, who's going to explain how cannabinoids interact with the endocannabinoid system throughout much of the animal world, and why scientists continue studying these compounds so closely.
How does CBD hemp oil work in the animal's body?
So, cannabinoids will interact with a number of different receptors that are all throughout the body, but they will also act with what's called the endocannabinoid system. And so the endocannabinoid system is a bodily system that is intertwined with all other aspects of our physiology and animals as well, because the endocannabinoid system is found throughout the animal kingdom. It exists in dogs, cats, horses, ferrets, pigs, birds, you name it. It doesn't exist in insects, but throughout the animal kingdom, especially all vertebrate animals, it's ubiquitously present. And this system consists of the cannabinoid receptors that cannabinoids bind to, the endocannabinoids that our own bodies produce. So you and I, your dog, we all produce our own cannabinoids within our body. And then the third component of the endocannabinoid system is the enzymes that make and break down these endocannabinoids. So what cannabinoids will do is they interact with this endocannabinoid system and the endocannabinoid receptors to create therapeutic functions and therapeutic benefits. It also interacts with other receptors that are not a part of the endocannabinoid system to help create these therapeutic benefits. So, CBD is really interesting because it's been listed to interact with over 40 different cellular targets. So not just ones within the endocannabinoid system. One example is that it has been shown to interact with the 5-HT1A receptors, which are serotonin receptors. And that's hypothesized is that that's one way it helps to decrease anxiety. When we get down to the basis of it, it's all cannabis, but there's a lot of different terminology out there now that gets confusing to a lot of people. What's marijuana and what's hemp? The easiest way to understand it is that, hemp is now a legal definition. So hemp is cannabis plants that are less than 0.3% THC by dry weight. So when you take the actual plant and you dry it out, if you test it and it has less than 0.3% THC, then that can be classified as hemp. If it has more than 0.3% THC, then that's technically marijuana, even though marijuana is an outdated term, and we tend to use cannabis on the marijuana side, which gets even more confusing. But for us as a company, we separate it as cannabis and hemp, even though technically hemp is cannabis. So we have our Vet CBD cannabis line that has been around since 2015. And then this year we're launching our Vet CBD hemp line, which is going to be available online and in non-dispensary retail outlets. Now, when it comes to product formulation, there's a general category that CBD products can be broken down into. That's full spectrum products, broad spectrum products, and isolate. So, starting with the most simple is what we call isolate. So, CBD isolate is just 99+% pure CBD. So when you're using that in a formulation, all you're getting is CBD. You're not really getting any of the other cannabinoids that come from the cannabis plant. Now, on the other end,
terpenes as well, right?
Right. So it's pretty much stripped of everything else except just CBD. And then on the other end of that, you have what we call full spectrum products. There's been over 120 different cannabinoids that have been identified. Now, that's not to say that every single plant has all 120 of those cannabinoids, because the largest amount of cannabinoids are found in THC, CBD, CBG, CBC, CBN. And then the other cannabinoids that are found tend to be much, much smaller quantities, if at all. So for example, there's a lot of plants out there that are very, very high THC, but have very little in terms of any other cannabinoids. And then there's other strains out there that can have a really nice full spectrum, whereas they have, a high amount of CBD, they have some THC, some good amounts of CBC and CBG as well. So it also depends on the strain that you're working with. Isolate is on one end, and then on the other end, you have what's called full spectrum. And so full spectrum does contain small amounts of THC, as well as other cannabinoids, usually CBC and CBG and sometimes CBN. And the reason why this is important is because there's been a lot of studies, both preclinical studies in lab animals, in petri dishes or test tubes, but also in humans as well, that have shown that when using a full spectrum product versus an isolate, you actually get greater therapeutic benefits. You're able to use lower doses and you can have fewer side effects than compared to using an isolate. So that's why we use full spectrum products, because you get greater therapeutic benefits from a full spectrum product.
We've got the differences between the CBD isolate, the full spectrum, but then a little confusing to viewers and even myself is, what is it that they're marketing in the middle calling broad spectrum?
Broad spectrum is essentially the THC taken out. So, broad spectrum, it's done through a chemical process in which the THC is removed out of full spectrum. Now, a lot of times what happens is when that THC gets removed, we see a lot of other minor cannabinoids like CBC and CBG tend to drop out as well. There are some improved techniques out there now that preserve some of those minor cannabinoids like CBC and CBG. But generally what happens is broad spectrum is somewhere in the middle between isolate and full spectrum. What it does is it strips out some of those cannabinoids like THC. We covered a lot.
We did cover a lot. And the pet area is so important and near and dear to my heart. I very much like the vet CBD formulations. I've used them on my dogs, the full spectrum in particular for more severe, older, senior arthritis. So that's an exciting area too. But it's important to understand the choices and to get the right product. So as cannabinoid research continues to evolve, scientists are learning more, not only about cannabinoids themselves, but also how cannabis interacts with our bodies, and more importantly, or most importantly, or as importantly, with our brains, with brain behavior and long-standing cultural perceptions. And perhaps one of the biggest shifts we're seeing today is a move away from fear and stigma toward evidence, education, and more nuanced conversations. But we have to have the vocabulary to have the conversations. And I think we'll be catching up. So more nuanced conversations about cannabis and wellness, and to help us become more exposed, I want to revisit part of a conversation with a very gifted neuroscientist, Dr. Manesh Gurn, who studies consciousness, neuroplasticity. How's that one? Neuroplasticity. I thought decarboxylation and endocannabinoid system was a mouthful. Oi, neuroplasticity and the evolving science surrounding cannabis and related compounds. Very, very, very important conversation to listen to. So without further ado, we're going to bring back Dr. Manesh Gurn, because it was a really, really valuable conversation. A vegetable and an herb. Can you verify that?
Certainly. I mean, we can call cannabis a plant, a herb, and it's a different class than fungi. Obviously, it's not a mushroom, but similar in that it's a naturally occurring organism. It's been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years in different cultures across the world. And it's quite interesting that we are very idiosyncratic in the modern world as defining these compounds as drugs to be outlawed. Because cannabis, as well as magic mushrooms, have been revered as almost as sacraments, as inducing these spiritual and healing experiences that should be used in a ritual kind of way. And so, they've been kind of revered as these parts of the natural world as a gift to us that we can use for our own benefit. And so it's really interesting. We have this view of them as these dangerous drugs in the modern context.
Dr. Gurn, what exactly is neuroplasticity?
It's a fascinating topic that's actually becoming more and more of interest in the mental health fields as well as neuroscience. So neuroplasticity refers to the brain's ability to change itself, to rewire connections, and to change itself in response to experience, in response to injuries. It allows us to learn. It's involved in a variety of processes. And the old dogma, maybe 20 years ago, was that once we're an adult, our brains don't change. They're not plastic anymore. We're set in our ways. That's just how we are. And now we know from decades of research that it's not true.
So if my husband tells me, stop trying to teach an old dog new tricks, don't let him get off on that?
Yeah, I would not let people get away with that. I think that's just an excuse that people like to use. But I think the research has told us time and time again that the brain has this remarkable ability to change. And that might be less when we're older, but it's not zero. It's still there. And if you believe it's there, you can create the change. If you believe it's impossible, you're going to create that for yourself.
You could speak to whether the barriers of research are coming down. And if you could tell me a little bit about the research on CBG or how certain cannabinoids affect the brain.
Certainly. And so cannabis, as you were saying earlier, has a whole variety of different compounds within it. It's not just THC, which is what we usually associate it with because that's what gives the typical high we associate with cannabis.
And not to interrupt you, maybe you could just explain the difference as well. THC before it is heated up, it's actually in its raw form THCA. Is that correct?
Right, it is correct. Yeah, TCA when warmed up, when heated, turns into THC. Yes.
Which has, so even only THC has the psychotropic effect.
Yeah, certainly. And the three cannabinoids, as they're called, cannabinoids are just cannabis molecules that occur in the cannabis plant. The most popular ones that are studied and looked at for their benefits and effects are THC, which we just mentioned, CBD, and then CBG, which you also briefly mentioned. And so I can just walk through each of these really briefly. So THC is the compound, that makes people high. It makes people stoned. That's what people associate with cannabis. And this has the typical effects. And in addition to that, it can also, it's often, obviously, and many people know this, used to relieve anxiety. In lower doses, particularly, it can really calm people's anxiety and also help with things like chronic pain. And that's THC. But then also CBD is also potently reduces anxiety and has been found in studies to do that. Studies have also found that it could be antidepressant. And not only that, it's also anti-inflammatory. So people, even with arthritis and different inflammatory conditions, are experiencing relief from CBD. Not to mention also its effects for reducing epileptic seizures. So reducing seizures for people with epilepsy. And it's actually FDA approved for that. It is a compound CBD-based drug that does that. So CBD has no psychological effects acutely, like it doesn't make you high, but behind the scenes of our biology through our endocannabinoid system, which I could talk about, has all these different health benefits. And then the last one is CBG, which is a kind of simpler molecule than CBD or THC, and actually is, can be considered a precursor of them. It's can turn into them with different steps. And that's also very much involved in reducing inflammation. It modulates our immune system. And it also relieves oxidative stress, meaning it's an antioxidant, which again, it means it clears up cellular damage. It's healthy for our cells as well throughout our bodies.
There are actual peer-reviewed studies for cannabis on those indications. Is that correct?
Yeah, certainly. These are the most rigorous randomized controlled trials done at esteemed institutions with cannabis and for psychedelics for that matter.
Great. And on our show page, we'll list references for our listeners. Yes, for anti-seizures, Epidiolex, CBD is used in Epidiolex, pharmaceutical drug, which that'll be a whole other episode, has caused quite confusion because once the FDA approved it as an ingredient in a prescription drug, they didn't speak to it as an ingredient in food or in supplements, which is holding things up when it comes to food and supplements. Do you believe CBD it should be available in tinctures, gummies, topicals?
100%. I think they're trying to monopolize by making it into a psychiatric drug that they can profit off of and patent. And it's an IP play. It's really just a psychiatry pharmaceutical play. That's what that is. I think CBD should be widely available in a variety of different forms. It's non-psychoactive. It's not addictive. It's not harmful outright for the brain or body. If anything, it's really beneficial for it when used in the reasonable doses. And so there's no reason why it should be outlawed the way it should be. This doesn't make any scientific sense.
What are some of the common misconceptions you've encountered? And can you debunk them with what the research says?
Certainly. So let's start with cannabis. So one of the most common ones, and we were talking about this before the show started as well, is the idea of cannabis as a gateway drug. Now, I heard this growing up. A lot of people did. It's just part of basically drug war propaganda, essentially is what it is. And there's no evidence in the epidemiological studies, the large-scale survey studies, that that's the case. The things that get cannabis to lead to other drug use are related to your social environment, socioeconomic status, all these different factors, social factors and cultural factors. There's no evidence that cannabis use alone leads people to try other drugs. And I think that's just a myth that should really just not exist anymore, but people seem to still believe it, but there's no evidence for it.
A big part of that is because they're both classified legally as Schedule 1.
Yeah, which is absurd. And this is really funny, Maria, because you mentioned earlier the US had a patent on the medicinal use of cannabinoids going back decades, while at the same time the FDA was saying, and DEA, it's Schedule 1, it's no potential for medical use and high abuse potential. When they had a patent showing that it's not that, it's absurd.
As a neuroprotectant, and they weren't allowing the NFL and the football players. My God.
Yeah, who could have really benefited that from concussion recovery? And that's the topic we didn't talk about, but CBD can be really helpful for recovery from a brain injury or a stroke for that matter. There's studies on this. So it's quite terrible it's like anti-scientific. So another one is that, and this is a nuanced one, but the idea that cannabis damages your brain. So I've looked personally at a lot of research literature on how brain imaging has shown differences in the brain as a result of cannabis use. We reviewed every study ever done on whether cannabis use changes the structure of our brain. And what we found is that a lot of studies found increased size in certain brain regions. A lot of studies found decreased size in a lot of brain regions. When we bring them all together, they cancel each other out. So what that means is it's a mess of research that there's no conclusions that can be drawn on actual structural changes that last in your brain as a result of cannabis use. And in terms of what that means for brain damage, it means there's no reliable effect. And if we could say anything, it's that heavy chronic use in adolescence likely does cause potentially damage or developmental changes in the way, impairments in the way the brain might develop in certain ways, and that's a risk factor. I would certainly not advocate for a heavy chronic use in teenagers or early adults for that matter. It's all about moderation. And the research does suggest that using it at reasonable dosages, not every day, but in a moderate way, has minimal to no harmful effects. There's no evidence that damages the brain per se. And in fact, as we've been saying, depending on the strain, especially if it's a high CBD ratio strain, it can be even good for the brain. It can even be anti-inflammatory and antioxidant, which are the two things that basically mean neuroprotectant and protecting the health of your neurons. I want to add here, actually important, is that if you look at the effects of alcohol on the brain, the amount of brain damage that alcohol creates, whether you're an adult or an adolescent, is far, far greater than cannabis. Because alcohol is directly neurotoxic. Cannabis isn't. Cannabis over time will create changes in your brain and, in a more subtle way.
So Willie Nelson's 91 years old, and I could say I don't know how many decades he's been smoking cannabis, but many decades. And thank God it wasn't alcohol. I don't know if he'd be here for his 91st birthday, let alone still doing concerts.
Because alcohol also speeds up dementia and Alzheimer's and cognitive decline. Alcohol does that in a way cannabis doesn't. Cannabis can even protect against that. CBD is used to help with people with Alzheimer's. And so these are important distinctions. Alcohol, we culturally, we're growing up in certain cases, and there's a lot of maturity around these things and awareness. Just, it's hard because that's what you were taught growing up. But I think we need to be open to the facts and what's real and what the science is telling us. Otherwise, we're closing ourselves off from a potentially extremely beneficial, holistic resource for our health, right? Create the change. If you believe it's impossible, you're going to create that for yourself.
If you believe it's impossible, you're going to create that for yourself. We don't want to close ourselves off to healthy alternatives, or at least exploring their potential. So, as we begin wrapping up today's conversation, I want to leave you with a few quick takeaways and answer some of the questions I get asked most often about CBD, THC, and cannabinoid products. What's the biggest difference between CBD and THC? THC is the primary psychoactive cannabinoid associated with euphoric, intoxicating effects or the traditional cannabis high, while CBD is generally considered non-intoxicating and is more commonly associated with wellness-focused products. Why do cannabis products affect people differently? Because cannabinoid experiences are highly individualized. Factors like body chemistry, dosage, metabolism, product formulation, tolerance, and delivery method. Consumption method. If you inhale as opposed to ingest, the inhalation goes to the lungs directly to the bloodstream. It has a faster onset. When you consume through digestion, something you eat, an edible, it's got to go through your digestive system and it can take longer for the onset. A topical, different reaction. All of the different factors influence how a product feels from one person to another. Coffee I can't drink after 3 p.m. I know people who can't have it after 12 noon. I know people who take it right before bed. It hits people differently depending on body chemistry, dosage, metabolism, the product formulation, your tolerance level, and how you take it. So this leads us right into why do edibles feel different than smoking or vaping? Well, edibles move through the digestive system first, which means they often take longer to kick in and can sometimes feel stronger or last longer than an inhaled product. That's why the experts recommend starting with low doses and waiting before consuming more. The onset's going to take longer. And, start with a low dose. Don't get impatient. Wait an hour. See how you feel. See how it hits you. If you keep piling it on higher and deeper, oh boy, when it hits, you're not going to be able to back out of it. And the onset does take a little bit longer. What should consumers look for when shopping for cannabinoid products? Well, consumers, you, me, all of us should look for third-party lab testing, transparent ingredients on the labels, cannabinoid potency information. I never buy flower unless it tells me exactly the percentage of THC in the flower or CBD in the flower and is backed by a third-party lab test. And you want to look for reputable brands operating within regulated systems whenever possible. Guys, we have to support the reputable brands that are operating within a tightly regulated, inconsistent system, which costs so much money to do it right. So brands that are well-meaning, that are third-party lab testing, that are using quality ingredients, that are transparent about their ingredients right on their labels, that are transparent and have the cannabinoid potency information backed by third-party lab testing. These are reputable, well-meaning brands. They're doing it right, and they're not incentivized to. Let's put it that way. The cost of compliance makes many, many, many wonderful brands not be able to survive legalization. And some of the best hemp products I've ever seen come and go. I've watched them literally die on the vine, on the shelves of warehouses because of such of an inconsistent patchwork of regulations. So again, it all starts with education, and that's what we need. We need to know what we're dealing with, how it could help us, and not, throw the baby out with the bathwater. So what does full spectrum mean? Full spectrum products generally contain multiple cannabinoids and terpenes naturally found in the cannabis plant, rather than isolated CBD alone or CBD and having the THC extracted. It's full spectrum. I like to compare CBD alone to maybe going to a concert and having a violin soloist versus hearing the whole orchestra together, which sometimes highlights the violinist or drowns it out. So That's the entourage effect. So that's full spectrum. What's one of the biggest misconceptions about cannabis? That there's a universal cannabis experience. There's not. And I know everybody, you want to know, how's it going to hit me? How did you feel after you took it? I could feel groggy after having a cup of coffee where someone else can feel energized. There's not a universal cannabis experience. It's very individualized medicine. Even though it's used recreationally as well, it is a medicine and it's individualized. So cannabinoid experiences, they vary significantly depending on the individual and the product involved. So again, check it out, go low and slow. And finally, make informed choices. The education matters, not just the marketing hype, not just the regulatory jargon, not just the scientific language, which is sometimes intimidating. We have to language it in an accessible way so that you can really discern and navigate your cannabis experience to being a good one. Cannabis conversations are evolving quickly. Research is evolving. Product innovation is evolving. And understanding cannabinoids, even at a basic level, can help you make a more informed and intentional decision. I'm excited to see education evolving. So, as we wrap up today's conversation, I think the biggest takeaway is this. CBD and THC are not competing conversations. They're part of a much larger discussion about cannabis, cannabinoids, wellness, science, and informed consumer choice. And perhaps most importantly, to remember, there is no universal cannabis experience. At the end of Prohibition, there was no universal kind of alcohol experience. Everyone had to learn on their own how they react to whiskey versus wine. And as it evolved and we went from spirits to different wines and beer, there's no universal experience. Everybody reacts differently and everyone had to find their way. They weren't as in the dark or restricted because there wasn't 8 decades of not only prohibition, but misinformation and a horrible stigma attached to it. So what works for one person may feel completely different for another, depending on the product type. Is it CBD? Is it THC? Is it CBD combined with THC? If it's CBD only, is it from the hemp plant? Is it from the cannabis plant, aka marijuana? If it's CBD, is it an isolate? Is it broad spectrum? Is it full spectrum? So if you ever tried a CBD gummy and felt nothing or had a bad reaction, find out, was it an isolate? Was it broad spectrum? Was it full spectrum? Don't write it off. This takes patience, but it's a very exciting frontier and it's really worth looking into because unlike figuring out, which wine agrees to you, whether a Merlot versus a Chardonnay gives you a headache, this has the real promise of some very, very, very exciting wellness potential. So, and could be the next healthy alternative to drinking less alcohol, taking less prescription drugs. We have to see, but it all starts with education. And there's enough products out there with enough promise, it's worth checking out. So what works for one person may not feel the same for another. It depends on the product type, the dosage, the cannabinoid ratios, your individual body chemistry, and your individual sensitivity. That's why access to clear, reliable consumer information matters. Real, relevant, and rooted in truth. That's what I'm here to do. Because in a marketplace filled with products, marketing, opinions, and misinformation, understanding the basics can help consumers make more thoughtful and informed decisions. I want to thank all of the experts and past guests whose voices helped shape today's special episode. And thank you. And if today's conversation sparked your curiosity, you can continue exploring beginner-friendly cannabis education, wellness insights, recipes, and product guides at greenbeelife.com. Until next time, I'm Maria Calabrese, and this has been Just Say No. Stay informed, stay curious, and always just say no. That's with a K, K-N-O-W. Take care, guys. Just Say No is a Green Bee Life presentation airing live weekly on Friday afternoons from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific on KCA Radio and KCAA TV. Archived audio episodes are on Green Bee Life, greenbeelife.com, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and most third-party major platforms. For archived videos, check them out on GBL TV, on Green Bee Life, YouTube, and Rumble. To follow us, our Instagram and Facebook is at Just Say No Radio. To apply to be a guest on the show or for sponsorship and advertising opportunities, go to greenbeelife.com/Just Say No, and feel free to reach out to me, Maria, for any questions. I'm at maria@greenbeelife.com, or call me at 818-758-6925.